Record now. And I'm just going to do a quick intro here, so I'll share a couple of slides. All right, here's your fair warning about the recording. And I will now officially welcome you to our February 2021 virtual quality talk. Nice to see everyone who came out today. As usual, we will thank D2L for the use of their corporate Zoom account for this meeting. Just a reminder of the great people behind the KWSQA who work hard to bring you these events. I often forget to introduce myself at the start, so here's my chance. I'm Tina, I am your KWSQA president, and you can see all the other great folks who help out with all of the organizing and keeping the organization moving ahead, especially in these challenging times. So thanks to all of these great people for helping me out. If you're looking to stay in touch with the KWSQA and what's going on, following us on Twitter is always a good option. If you were here last month, you would have already seen this slide, but I'll just recap in case there's anyone new. Here are our plans for 2021 so far. We do plan to continue with these virtual quality talks on an approximately monthly basis. We are also planning to bring back our testing games events. We are just sort of working out the details of how exactly we want to adjust them for a virtual format to make sure that they are still fun and effective for everyone to participate in. So stay tuned for more on that coming soon. And our third announcement about 2021 is kind of a sad one, which is that we won't be hosting a targeting quality conference again this year. But we were just talking before the meeting started about how all of us are already looking forward to 2022, and we hope that we will see you at targeting quality then. We've got our next 3 quality talks planned out already, and so here they are in case you want to mark your calendars for March 31st. We've got Raj coming to present, and end of April we have Lavina, and end of May we've got Ali. These are all going to be great talks, and I'm excited to hear all of them in the coming months. Later on in the year, though, we do still have some slots open. So if you have an idea for a talk that you would like to share at one of these meetings, we would be very interested to hear from you. And we've got a CFP form that's always available at our website at kwsqa.org. So head over there and answer a few questions about your talk, and we will be in touch. I mentioned this last month as well, but again, to recap, this year, we plan to offer what we're calling sustaining memberships to our organization, and they'll be available soon from our website. We still haven't sorted out the final details of how we want to implement that either, but stay tuned for more information. The reason why you might decide to purchase one of these is that it's just a way to help support us during these times where we really don't have an income stream because we're offering our events free and online. It also enables you, if you are a resident or if you work in the Kitchener-Waterloo region, you would then become eligible to vote in or to run in our 2021 election for the KWSQA Board of Directors. So those are some of the benefits that you would have if you purchase one of these memberships, and stay tuned for exactly how to do that in the near future. Finally, a reminder that our code of conduct applies in the same way to all of our virtual events that it formerly did at our in-person events. So feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions at all about the code of conduct, or you want to report anything related to the code of conduct, and we will get back to you right away. So finally, just an outline of our agenda for today. We will start with the good part, the presentation. For Q&A today, we're going to try something a little bit different because Josh's presentation is sort of more code-based and includes demos and that kind of thing. We thought it would make sense to do questions throughout the session rather than waiting until the end. It might be hard to sort of rewind to the exact place that you had your question in terms of the overall overall flow of the presentation. So I have set the meeting such that you can type in the chat at any time. You can also unmute yourself and just speak anytime. And Josh is open to being interrupted during the talk and taking questions as they come. We probably still can reserve some dedicated Q&A time at the end if you have sort of more general or overarching things that you want to discuss. But for the sort of in the moment, what's going on in that line of code type questions, just feel free to use your voice or the chat to ask at that moment. You'll also notice if you've been attending these events recently that this month we switched to having a registration process for attending. Previously, we just kind of posted the link on the internet and you could show up or not, depending on your schedule. But the reason we are trying the registration method this month is we are going to use that as the way to get in touch with you after the session for your feedback about the session. So just general feedback for Josh, the speaker, and also for our organization about how the meeting was run and that kind of thing. We were finding that it was a little bit too rushed and challenging to gather quickly the feedback on those types of subjects before we closed the Zoom right in the moment. And then because there wasn't a sign up process, we didn't have a way of getting in touch with the people who were there afterwards. So we're going to try that this month. So you will see a feedback survey in your email after this meeting is over. And I think that's all for announcements and preamble. And now we'll get to the good part. We would like to welcome Josh Grant today, who's going to show us the awesome parts of PyTest. And so we're really looking forward to seeing his expertise in this area and hearing about how you too can leverage these awesome things in your own work, hopefully. So I will turn it over to Josh now.
Great, thank you, Tina. Thank you for that intro. Yeah, so I am super excited to be here. KWSQA, great organization, love it. Thank you for having me. And I guess talk about Python, so everyone wins. So a little bit about me and I guess the presentation. So I'm Josh Grant, as we've said. I am currently a solution architect at Sauce Labs, which is a cloud-based platform for running all of your automated tests and increasing your digital confidence. This is not a product pitch, so don't worry. I'm currently located in Toronto, and I grew up in KW, so this is a great organization. Love it, love it. So for today, I'm not going to have slides. This is going to be kind of a code-based talk. I'm going to walk through some different automated test scenarios using PyTest and Python. And I'm going to, I guess for the audience, I'm going to be thinking about kind of the test automation pyramid, starting with unit tests and kind of going up to service level tests and then rounding out with UI tests with Selenium. And I'll show all the fun stuff you can do with PyTest there. So yeah, so definitely ask questions in the chat or interrupt me and stop. But there should also be time for questions at the end. So I'm happy to take any kind of questions around anything. So I'm going to share my screen and hope for the best. Okay, that's good enough. All right. So here we are. So the theme for my code is talking about the weather. Nice, easygoing thing to talk about. It's kind of a little theme, I guess, for this. So let's say I am a developer and I'm building an app related to getting the weather. So I decide to write a class. And maybe my class is something like this. I have to convert temperatures from Fahrenheit to Celsius. Maybe I have to do more complicated things. I have to pull data from somewhere to get weather data or temperatures. But for kind of the demonstration purposes of this, let's say I have this class. So I have 2 Celsius and 2 Fahrenheit, pretty obvious kind of conversions back and forth. So I might ask myself, how do I test this? Maybe I'm doing test-driven development and I'm trying to iterate on how to build my classes. Or maybe I'm just quality-minded and I want to verify that this does the thing that I'm hoping it does. So what I can do is I can write, so there's different ways you can do this in Python. You could use the included unit test package that comes with Python to write unit tests. You could use other test frameworks that I won't talk about here. But I want to show how this might work with PyTest because I think PyTest is great. So what I do first So I go pip install PyTest. Actually, what hang on a sec. I guess what I do first is create a virtual environment, which I should have done. But first thing I'm going to do is just install PyTest. So pip install PyTest, installs the PyTest library, gives you a test runner, gives you some code utilities to kind of set up your tests. But the nice thing about writing unit tests or writing kind of simple tests with PyTest is that there's not a lot of overhead. So this is it. I've written 2 tests, and these are just kind of really basic tests to get a feel for that my functions are working, that my methods are working in my class. So one is to make sure that I test that the freezing temperature is correct in Fahrenheit. So if I start with 0 degrees Celsius, then I'll get 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And I could test the other way. So if I start with 32 degrees Fahrenheit, I'll get 0 degrees Celsius. And I just want to verify that my thing works. Oh, and aha, I did need that import. Sorry about this. Okay, so that's it. A few things to notice here. I don't need to use classes. I don't need to use object-oriented programming. I've just written some functions in Python in a file. I don't have to import anything from PyTest. I don't have to import any classes to subclass, or I don't have to understand how PyTest might work in that case. I can just write tests. The only thing I need to know is that I start my tests with test. So test here, or test underscore even. I can start with that here too. So let's see what I get. So if I go PyTest and I choose this file, test calculations, it runs super fast, which is good. So I just import my class. I'm just testing it. So I have some basic idea of like what my classes are doing. And I don't have to do anything else. So this is really great. It's really low overhead to get started with PyTest. You don't have to know a lot of the internals of PyTest. You can just start writing tests, which is really great. Yeah. Any questions or comments at this point? If you have any, yeah, I'm happy to answer them later too. We'll come back to this too. But, so yeah, nice and easy breezy. And then the other thing I should point out is that when you run tests, you get, oh, wait, there's this. How does PyTest know where to find the test file? Okay, great question. So I'll put this away for now. So the way, so yeah, this is a good question. So what I've done in this case is, if I scroll up, get this out of the way. So what I'm doing with the PyTest runner is I'm specifying in this case a specific file. So I'm saying, look in this file for tests. And PyTest will look through and say, oh, I found this. It's a function that starts with test. I found this function that starts with test. It will collect them and then execute them. So by default, if you just run PyTest, if I did this, which I'm not going to do, if I did this, PyTest would just look in the current directory and below and just try to find everything that matches test. So it'll find classes, it'll find functions, anything that matches the criteria for tests, it'll find and try to execute. But you can also pass in specific files, and you can also pass in, I don't do this very often, but you can also pass in specific functions. So you can say run this specific function or run function matching this pattern or something like that. You can do the same thing with files. I could do this, which I'm also not going to do. Oh, I guess I could do this. I could do something like this, and it's say test cal. So like maybe there's calendar tests, maybe there's calculator tests. So I could do this and it will run the same thing. So yeah. So nice and easy breezy. You get this nice output. It's even color coded these days, which is great. So green is pass, red is fail. And you get some other warnings, or yellow, like if you're doing something questionable, but it's not quite a test failure. You get some warnings out there too. So this is nice. So yeah, so that's unit testing, and of course this will expand out. So if I write more tests, PyTest will just figure it out, run the tests, it'll just work. It's really great. So let's move up a little bit in the test pyramid. So let's talk about services. I'll close these out, I guess. So let's talk about services. So let's say in my, so I need to get information from a weather service. So I have a weather service like this. So Open Weather Map is an open, free-ish weather service to get weather data out. You can get weather conditions for specific areas, current temperatures, current wind conditions, that sort of thing. And if I run this as an example, weather API. So if I run this, I'm going to get back some information around weather. You can specify a location by ID. So I have this ID over here somewhere, and it gives me temperature for somewhere in Cairns, Australia. I don't know, it's just an example I found. But this is a characteristic. You can change this ID to get information for specific areas. You can also search by country code or by city code or that kind of thing. And you get back all this information, like where is the specific longitude and latitude, what are the temperature ranges, it's cloudy right there, scattered clouds, that kind of thing. So you might encounter a service like this. It could be something external. Maybe you're testing something that depends on this external service. Maybe it's internal. Maybe you have a team within your organization that is producing a service that you consume. So you could walk over to their desk and have a chat with them. But you might also want to just have some checks to make sure that like the service is working or service kind of does what you expect it to. So how would you test this with PyTest? So let's take a look at what that might look like. So here I'm going to introduce one of my favorite things ever is requests, the Python requests library. It's a wonderful, wonderful library for working with HTTP requests. One of the best out there. It's a great reason just to use Python in general really is requests. So I'm going to make use of this, integrate it into my tests. So kind of like my unit tests, I'm just going to write two tests. I'm saying test a lot. One is that my service is up. So can I hit this Open Weather Map service and get back data? And the other test is that, do I have the current temperature? So if I make a request for weather data, am I getting back something that's, that has the current temperature for that location? And so both tests kind of are structured in the same way. I have my API key in order to get this data back. And close that up. And in this case, I'm looking for current weather data for Toronto, where I am, Toronto, Canada, not Toronto, Ohio, Toronto, US. Yeah. So first test is very simple. Make the request, parse the response, and I'm going to verify I get back a 200 status code. So the service is up and running. Really, really great utility online. http.cat. If you haven't seen this, I thoroughly recommend it. It's HTTP status codes as cats. So you can kind of get a visual understanding of like what different status codes mean. And of course, cats are wonderful. So this, I'm just verifying 200. That means it's up, everything's good. And the second test is when I make the similar request, I get back something in the request body that's temperature, that's a current temperature. Here I'm leaning on that the response body has this particular structure that I'm able to parse through, and I can find this temperature in this exact place, which maybe is good, maybe it's bad. But for demonstration purposes, I'm just kind of showing like, yes, there is a current temperature that I can make use of. Yeah, so I'm going to run this. So again, PyTest, test weather service. Oh dear. Install requirements. That's a good idea. Ooh, should have thought of that one. See, and that's kind of fun because in my unit test case, I literally didn't need anything else with PyTest. No other dependencies, no imports, nothing. When I start doing things that are slightly more complicated, I'm going to need those other dependencies. So let's try it again. Weather service. All right, so this is running. So the tests take a bit longer to run than the unit test because now I have to make a request online. It has to go over the internet. to somewhere and then come back with the response. Oh, but I get the same output. So whether I'm testing at the unit or the unit level or at service level, same tests, same everything put together. So that's pretty good. So let's take a little look at, you may have been thinking, you may have wondered, I have this code is the same and this code is the same. If I'm going to write more tests, I would have to copy paste this code. It would get unwieldy. Does PyTest have a way to handle this kind of before behavior of setting this up? The answer is yes. PyTest has a construct called Fixtures. So if you've worked with test frameworks like JUnit or TestNG or the other ones in JavaScript, Jasmine and Mocha. So there's constructs in those frameworks such as before and after functions or methods. So do this before and do this after. So PyTest has something a little bit different. It has the concept of fixtures. And the idea of a fixture is that it's going to create some kind of object or something that I'm going to pass into my tests that the tests then have access to. So it encourages code reuse. So it's not really like a before and after approach. It's more of like, here's this item, a fixture, if you will, and you can pass it into your test to make use of. Again, because in PyTest, you don't have to use object-oriented programming. You don't have to use classes. You don't have to manage classes. You can kind of remove that abstraction, if you will. So here's the same test, but I've pulled out the common code into something called an endpoint. I just called it endpoint. It could be called anything. In fact, I don't want to change it because it'll wreck everything. But you can call it anything. And I'm just going to put this together. I pulled out these into constants, whatever. And if I run the tests, I get the same thing. Oh, this is fun. Okay, let's change this. So if I run the tests, test the fixture weather service. So the tests run just as before. So I've been able to restructure my tests such that I now have some reuse. I have this fixture that I can use, and I can apply this to other tests. So if I write more tests, I can reuse this thing as opposed to copying pasting code or and risking messing something up or forgetting something. And it's all the same. And I think what I had before, it's like, let's say, there's like lots of questions.
It's actually just one question that was asked and then retracted and then.
PyTest. Is it the test calculations job to find the temperature converter module? Yes, it is. So yeah, so kind of backing up several steps. Oh, we can go back, I guess, and do this. This is definitely a good question. So if I go back to test calculations, so yes, the responsibility of this test file is, so it has to know like where this temperature converter is. So this is a conventional Python thing. If I want to use a class or I want to use a module from somewhere else locally, I can import it. So I'm going to import, so from my calculations file here, I'm going to import this temperature calculations class and create an instance of it. So that's a conventional Python thing, being able to import things from other files, other modules. And yeah, just kind of handle it that way. So if that answers that question, and there was some other more complicated question or like more complicated train of thought, I guess. Chat. Why is the underline under requests? Aha, ha, 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 yes. Oh, your guess is as good as mine. Let's take a look. Yes, let's take a look at what this is. Import request cannot be resolved from source. So this is, so the short story is Visual Studio Code, which is the editor I'm using, doesn't know that requests is a library that I've installed. That's kind of the short, simplistic answer. The longer answer is that, well, I guess that's the longer answer too. Visual Studio doesn't really recognize, like if I set this up, and if I had installed some kind of plugin for Visual Studio to kind of handle my Python and virtual environment and blah, 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 this squiggle would probably go away. But Visual Studio Code is highlighting, hey, I don't think I know what this is. I don't know where it's coming from. But that doesn't really apply in this situation. So yeah, I know I'm not, Visual Studio Code is great, but I use it often because it's cross language, and in my day-to-day, I'm using a lot of different programming languages. So yeah. So yeah, and I guess just to kind of wrap up this, let's take a look at what might happen when a test fails. So let's say I think I'm going to get a 404. I'm not going to find this response, but I actually do find it. So maybe tests, fixture. And so it fails. So I have one test that passed, second test passed. So I have one passed and one failed. And the fun thing is that it will show me which line threw an exception or raised an exception, and what that might look like. So in this case, my assertion failed. So it's like it was looking for a 404, but I actually got a 200 back. So it kind of gives me an idea of what might have failed in this case. Yeah, API testing, it's great. Thoroughly recommend it. thoroughly recommend it. So yeah. Any other questions about kind of the service level tests? Yeah, if you have other questions, yeah, please come back and please ask me. Or like anything, like actually, like, yeah, I'll keep going, but yeah, please, any questions if I'm going too fast, if I'm going too slow, if there's something that isn't clear or I haven't explained well, yeah, please ask. So let's close all this up. So we're going to the very peak, the very top withering heights of the test automation pyramid, which is UI testing. In this case, I'm going to use Selenium. It's a tool near and dear to my heart. In this case, I'm going to launch an entire browser, open up the app in the browser and test at that level. And the app in question is going to be this one. So I have this app. It's a very, let's open it up, sure. So this app, it's very simple. It's a temperature converter. Once upon a time, this was like the basic React demo. So if you were learning React, you would start with this. And if I enter in a temperature into Celsius, it converts it to Fahrenheit. The application will kind of output this message here. So how might I test this with using automation in Selenium? Well, let's take a look. So I've written here a fixture. I've written some tests with Selenium and Python. I have two tests, as you may have guessed. One is that this message appears. So when I input something, I get a message back, which is important. I have my lower level tests to test that my calculations are correct. Maybe if I'm getting data back from a service, that's working properly. So at this point, I want to just verify, like, do I get a message in the UI? Like, when I input something, do I get something back? So that's that test. And I might want to verify that my message is correct. So in this case, let's close that up. In this case, if I input 0 degrees Celsius, I'll get something that says 0 degrees Celsius is 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And for both these tests, I'm going to use Firefox, my favorite browser. Hopefully there's some other Firefox users out there. But I have that locally, so it just tends to work. And I've set up a fixture. So I'm already thinking of code reuse. If you're doing UI level testing, Selenium-based testing, maintenance. You're always thinking about code reuse and how to maintain your test suite. So I've started with a fixture, and this is super fun. I really like this. This is kind of a cool thing in PyTest with fixtures. So I've defined a fixture called browser. I create a new WebDriver instance. So I'm going to open up an instance of Firefox. I'm going to yield that Firefox instance, and I'm going to quit. So the yield keyword is kind of neat here. Yield is kind of like return. So it will return this. So it's like this function returns D, but it doesn't halt the execution. So it doesn't actually stop the execution. So it'll keep executing this function. So start the Firefox instance, return it or yield it, and then quit. So at the end of the test, so this is kind of like my before, this is kind of like my after. It's kind of neat. It's kind of a neat Python thing. It's a great way to learn about the yield keyword, which is a fun keyword in Python. So let's see if I run this. Let's see what I get. PyTest app. So it's going to open up an instance of Firefox. It's going to go very quickly because computers are powerful. And I should get 2 passing tests. Oh, I got 1 failed. Or no. Oh, sorry. It was old. I do. I got 2 tests passed. So that's good. In fact, let's just to keep me honest here. Time for sleep. I'm going to just put some sleep statements in just so we can see what is going on in each. It's like the deep, dark secret of UI automation, sleep statements. So my browser opens up. I get the message appears. Same thing, and the message is actually correct. So there we go. I have passing tests. So this is really fun. Still get my nice output. Again, I can kind of reuse my test runner. I can do all that. But what else can I do? Like, as some of you may work with Selenium might have gathered, this is a little bit difficult to maintain because let's say I want to run my test against Safari. I'd have to go into my code. I'd have to go Safari. I'd have to run my test again. So if I want to make a change to accommodate a new browser or a new setting, maybe I want to pass in a Firefox profile or something, I need to now go into my code and make changes to my actual code. Maybe I forget the changes I make. Maybe they're broken. It doesn't work. Here we go. Trusty Safari. Safari test the pass for once. That's great. I'm not bitter. So how can I alleviate the situation? Like, I want to allow for options, for example, that I can pass in outside of changing code. So this is the last thing I want to kind of point out with PyTest. PyTest has a fantastic ecosystem of plugins. So you can do something that handle all kinds of different situations that testers and test automators might encounter regularly. So for example, if I go click install PyTest Selenium, this would install a plugin called PyTest Selenium that, you guessed it, handles working with Selenium in PyTest testing. So what PyTest Selenium does is that it, like other plugins in the PyTest world, is that it can add new options to run it at command line. So it will actually modify and update what the PyTest runner can do in this situation. It also can provide things like fixtures out of the box, or it can provide other functionality for your tests in your code. So let's take a look at what this might look like. So actually, I'm going to get rid of this. Oh boy. Oh boy, this is, oh dear. This is a mess. Apologize, everyone. Test, okay, do. Okay. So here, this is a test written with the PyTest Selenium plugin. So one thing that, this is spelled right. I think you're doing great. So what PyTest Selenium provides is a plugin, or sorry, a fixture. So this Selenium fixture is now something that will handle the browser instance. It's kind of like the fixture that I wrote before, where I'm creating browser and then I'm passing that into my tests. But PyTest Selenium, the PyTest Selenium plugin will provide me the Selenium fixture, so I don't have to write it myself. The other thing that it can do is provide command line options. So now I can go PyTest driver, and I can specify which driver I'd like to use. So if I want to use Firefox, I can then test that with plugin. So then at runtime, I can decide, oh, I want to test against Firefox, so I'll run against Firefox. And this kind of does the same thing as before. So the tests are the same, except it's using this fixture that's provided to me by the plugin. And it's also allowing me to choose a browser. So I can pick, for example, I want to go with Safari. I can change that here. I don't have to go in and change my code. I can also see exactly which browser is being chosen at runtime. Oh, this is, yeah. Okay, anyway, it worked. Yeah. And I guess the other thing you can do, let's say, so Selenium, wonderful tool. Let's say you want to run against a remote grid. So let's say you want to run against a remote grid being hosted within your network or within your org, or you want to use a cloud service like, I don't know, Sauce. PyTest Selenium also allows for that. So this is kind of something that's can get a little bit complicated with Selenium testing. It's where you have to specify a remote grid and you have to pass in capabilities and you need to know the address of the grid and blah, blah, blah. So, but you can do that using there we go. Oh, still doesn't like that. Oh, I know why. Sorry. Sorry, everyone. Coding demos. There we go. So now you can specify something like a cloud service provider, or you can specify a grid. I'm also making use of variables. So this is another plugin, PyTest variables, which allow you to pass in at runtime a set of variables that are in a JSON file. So if I have this, I can pass in these capabilities like this. But of course, I don't have to use this with just Selenium. I could use this with other things as well. And my tests have failed because obviously my demo has gone sideways. Oh, just, thank goodness it's Friday. But yeah. Anyway, this should work, but it doesn't, probably for some wacky connection reason that I can't troubleshoot right now. So yeah, sorry about that. But it should work. So yeah, so that's it. So that's kind of the awesome parts of PyTest. Lightweight and easy to use to write tests. Great integration with other Python tooling and packages. Fixtures are awesome, and also PyTest plugins to kind of handle those common problems that you might encounter. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, happy to take questions or have a chat.
I mean, one thing that came to mind for me is you called this discussion the awesome parts. Does that imply that there's some parts that are not awesome that maybe you would not recommend people use, or just kind of like common difficult things that people would encounter when getting started?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, great question. I love it. One is yeah, so classes, so object-oriented programming. You can do this with PyTest, and a lot of people do. I've done this, where you start writing test classes and you call it class equals test class or whatever. You go ahead, you write methods, and then maybe you even extend and like you have a base class, you have subclasses. That's fine, but then eventually you'll hit some walls with like before and after methods, or things kind of just don't work the way you expect them to. So I do recommend not using object-oriented programming, even if you can. PyTest kind of implies that, but it doesn't make it explicit. So that's one thing. The other thing that I don't like about PyTest is that it's actually difficult to get or to perform actions on, say, like test pass and failure. So like, let's say a test fails, you want to take a screenshot, or test fails, you want to send data somewhere. PyTests, actually, it's tricky to do this. It's something I wish was better in PyTest. But yeah, it's not as easy as it should be. So, yeah.
Hi, Josh. I have a question. I'm not an automated tester, but I would like to become one. And I was just wondering how I don't know if you were ever a manual tester, but how you made the transition.
Yeah, so this is a great question. So funny thing about me, I started software development as a test automation person. So I've only ever done test automation, which is rare in this world. But so I mean, so no, I haven't made the transition. I've worked with testers, great exploratory testers. I've worked with really good developers. So the one piece of advice I can give to you, if you want to get into test automation, learn to program. Get into programming. Python is a great choice. It's relatively easy to learn. There's lots of resources out there. More and more, a lot of university and college, if you're interested in this, university and college programs use Python as an introductory language. So like that's a thing. And just like test automation is great. So like PyTest is obviously awesome, as hopefully you've kind of gathered. So like, you know, get to know test tools, try things out, but also just try to kind of build fun little apps. And I pick Python. I like Python. I've kind of gotten to know it over the years, but JavaScript is a big thing now, Node.js, Java, if you're like super into that. Just like get into programming somehow, make a fun little, you know, program to do something that is interested, get to know the kind of programming. And yeah, just start programming and the testing. If you're a tester and you have that tester mindset of, you know, being curious and trying to kind of poke around and find all those edge cases and all that fun stuff going on in software, then yeah, just like see if you can build something and make it better.
Okay, yeah, because I'm kind of midway in between. Like, you know, I know Python, I've taken a Selenium course, like, you know, so I understood everything that you did, but it's trying to make the jump from not having done that in a job to making a resume and getting a job for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had this question before too. So, and one complaint I have, I have a lot of complaints. One complaint I have about test automation generally is that there aren't a lot of good examples that are easily available for people to kind of see or to practice with even. Um, there in the past there have been, but they've been lost to the sands of time, I guess. But if you're into, so another thing you can try, lots of open source projects need help with testing and writing tests, Selenium based tests or otherwise. Like I've contributed to open source projects just to write tests for them. It's like that's another thing you can try.
How do you find a good one?
Yeah, that's a good. So yeah, I love this question. How do you find a good open source project to get involved with? It's tricky. So I've tried it all different ways. It took a while. So first of all, don't get discouraged if like. So my advice, for what it's worth, my 2 cents, it's almost like finding like a good therapist or a good doctor, where it's like you got to try a few and kind of see how it's like and what the community is like and what the product, like what the actual app is like. So I mean, like there's different ways you can kind of go about it. Like there's one project that I really like called Proslint. And so what Proslint is, it's kind of like a linter, but for the English language.
Right.
So cool project. Cool project. Nothing to do with Selenium. Cool project. So I started using it. It was kind of fun and whatever. And then I realized like they had no tests, and I was like, okay, so I'll write some tests. And so I kind of knew what the product did. And so I mean, that's one way I did, is I just sort of found a cool project that was like a good, welcoming community, and contributed back to it. So like, so if you're, so I mean, that's one approach, is like try to find a cool open source project that you like, and then see what you can contribute into it. Or the somewhat trickier way that I found was look for an open source project that wants what you'd like to offer back to it, which is more complicated. But I guess.
So how do you do these? How do you do these searches? Like, where are you looking and how are you doing the search?
Well, when I sit with my brandy in front of my mahogany desk, how did I find Proslint? So honestly, I'll tell you the story of Proslint. I saw people talking about it on Twitter. They were like, oh, this is a cool thing. And like, I'm a writer, and like, I don't know if I like it or not. And I looked into it, and I was like, oh, I write stuff sometimes. And I started trying it out, and I was like, oh, it's cool. And I just dug a little deeper and dug a little deeper. So I mean, it's like for me, like finding projects, like it's really about like where do you find information? Like, I mean, if you're a tester or developer or whoever, like you work with computers, and you work with stuff, you like things. So like start from there, like start from like what's an interesting thing that maybe I've heard of or people have talked about, and then kind of try to drill down and like find more about it. There's other things you can, well, the other thing other thing that I can mention, I don't know if this is helpful or not, is Outreachy. People may have heard of. So Outreachy is a cool organization. They connect interns or co-ops or whoever with open source projects. So people that so like open source projects that want to hire interns to work on them. Outreachy has some cool projects, especially if you're an underrepresented minority. So I mean, like maybe there's something you can look at and see like what projects they support, because they're all about open source. Yeah, it's tough. I wish I had a better answer for you, but
No,
These have been some good tips, I think. Lots
Yep.
of good advice on various aspects. Appreciate you sharing your insights about your journey, Josh.
yeah,
We've got a couple other questions in the queue that maybe we should try to look at as well, though, if you want to see in the chat there.
all right, what do we have? Michael Bolton. What? I guess, what do you believe are the reasons for lack of good examples? Oh yeah, so this is good. Yeah, so I think there's two sides to this. One is that good automated tests and automated test frameworks are a feature of a good software project. So if you're working, so like a lot of software is closed source. Like I can't see the source for, I don't know, like Microsoft Office or Zoom. So they might have amazing test suites that do amazing things, but like I'll never see it. So and most people won't see it. So it's difficult to kind of get that information out. The other side of it is that open project, so open source. So open source tools, people are building out and they're of varying quality or whatever. And a lot of times what I find with open source projects is that there's not a great focus on testing and quality aspects. It's kind of like the idea is, I mean, I'm no expert on this. There are other people who are much smarter about this than I am. But for lack of a better reasoning, it's there isn't a tremendous focus on like software development practices and testing. So a lot of open source projects, even prominent ones, don't have great test automation code for. So it's difficult to look there. And then there have been some examples that do kind of satisfy both of these things. Like it's open and it's good and it's big. Mozilla's add-ons project comes to mind, but it's gone now. So I don't know. So yeah, it's sort of like a feature of like open source and closed source and how different software is made and kind of impacts that, I guess. It's
an interesting observation that a lot of open source projects you would characterize as like maybe not having good emphasis on testing. It sounds like potentially a gap that folks in this group or other similar roles could look towards filling, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the opinion that, or I'm becoming of the opinion that open source projects are really developer driven and they don't have all those other good things that software projects have, like testers or product owners or product managers or those sorts of people, for whatever reason. But yeah, so.
Cool. There's another question from Lindsay in the chat that would be good to touch on if you can.
Oh yeah, are there things that make PyTest better than working with something like JavaScript for Cypress, for example? That's a good question. So how can I answer this? So I mean, like, so PyTest, Python only. If you're in a JavaScript world, you can't use it. It also has kind of different approaches than like say Mocha or Jasmine, as Lindsay mentions. Yeah, I mean, it's really like it's a language thing. So like if you're in JavaScript, you can't use PyTest, and if you're in Python, you can't use Jasmine. It's there are things that like different test frameworks do well compared to like other test frameworks. But yeah, I guess if that answers the question.
Any other topics that people want to get into? We've got a couple minutes left.
I had a technical question if there isn't any others waiting in the wings, but Josh, this might be a little bit specific. You were using the open weather API. I'm kind of the assumption that we were treating that like an API that you owned as opposed to an open source API you were testing. So totally understand that. Having said that, I get the impression that the suite of sample tests you wrote, if they're relying on status codes coming back from that service, I know there was one test looking for a success for like, is the service up? I suspect the rest of the tests would fail and continue to run and fail if the service was down. Are there ways that we can not like get a blast of failures if a service is not up?
Yeah.
testing time?
Yeah, so this is okay. So this is a great question. Yeah, so I mean, oh, I love this question. This is a good one. This is great. So there's different ways you can approach this. Comes down to like how you want to test and what you want to test. So one thing you could do, you could have tests that mock data. You could say, I'm going to assume that my service is up, and I'm going to get back some kind of response. And so you could use mocked data that will always work because it doesn't make a network connection. It doesn't, it's sort of all built in. That's the wrong way to think about it. It doesn't make a network connection and depend on this service. It kind of, you have this data that you assume is going in and you kind of test based on that. So that's one thing you could do. Another thing you could do is you could say, you could structure your tests. This is something I didn't get into, but like you can also mark tests to say only run tests with these marks. So maybe like there's tests that are called network. So they depend on so that you have to have network connection to run them. So you could say run all the tests that are network and run all the tests that are not network. And so like you could kind of divide it up that way. Yeah, there's different ways you can approach this. I guess it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Like, are you like certain that the service is not up, or you want to verify the service is up separately or something like that? But yeah, very good question. Very good question. So it's something I didn't get into here is like test design. None of these tests are assumed to be good. They're just to kind of show the fun parts of PyTest. But yeah, really good question. Really good question. Yeah.
All right. Unless anyone wants to jump in with a last minute question, maybe we will end here. Going once. All right, so as I mentioned at the start, you will receive a survey in your email where we would love to get some feedback from you about how the session was today. Otherwise, we hope to see you out next month, and have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. We all learned a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.